Now, this is something that the scientists have been telling us for a long time, that the oceans are going to rise. Okay? Well, they've been rising for a long time. I'm going to throw out a lot of information that's going to actually dismiss that as just pure gospel. And this is going to throw a spanner in the works, just to start off with. The scientists believe that the Earth is spherical. Now, the only way that the oceans can rise is on a flat Earth principle. Got your attention yet? Right. Now, if you get the physical mass of the Earth, okay, and you work out the circumference, you work out the radius, and go and use a calculator, and how much physical mass of the Earth there is. Okay, now, type in an extra 1 metre. Okay, 1 metre, spherical. The actual physical mass of the planet would need to go pop and get bigger. How can the planet go from this to this? To go 1 metre out, the actual physical mass of the planet would have to increase. So I'm going to explain to you. I live in Sydney, Australia, and I live in a country that even our national anthem states our lands are girt by sea. In other words, we're surrounded by sea. We're surrounded by ocean. We're surrounded by water. Wouldn't we be the first ones to notice that the oceans were rising? Here's some footage of an ocean bath down at Wollongong. I use this to open with. There's 2 ocean baths here. One was built in 1919 and one was built in 1930. And they're still at sea level. Here's another one. Built by convicts in the 1800s. It's still at the same level. It's still at sea level. If you do a quick Google search, you'll find that Australia and its territories has 50,000 kilometres of shoreline. 50,000 kilometres. That is 10,000 kilometres more than the circumference of the Earth. We also have 11,000 beaches and about 100 ocean baths around one country. Surely we would know which one's which. But let's go back to this whole ice melting thing. Here's an iceberg, okay? Now, an iceberg, we've all been taught, we all know that an iceberg is 10% out of the water and 90% below the water. Also, ice expands when frozen. So when it melts, it goes back to the original mass, the original liquid mass. Now, I'm going to show you something, that technical tool to explain how water expands when it's frozen. Give me a second. Here we have a couple of sunny boys. Why am I using sunny boys to explain science? Or dismiss science? Is it obvious? They're delicious. The thing is, anyone my age has had a sunny boy in their life. When they come out of the cupboard, they're soft and squishy. When they come out of the freezer, they're rock solid and they expand. Don't believe me? Go buy some sunny boys. Unfortunately, you can't do that anymore. But you could always go out and buy some Zupa Dupas, put them in the cupboard, put a couple in the freezer, and you'll know. Rock hard, solid as a rock, soft, squishy. So, also if you dunk these in water, put them in a bowl, soft and squishy, sinks to the bottom. Frozen, floats to the top. Because when water freezes, it gets all sorts of little bubbles and oxygen inside of it. Kind of like when you freeze a bowl of water, and you'll note in the time lapse that the oxygen actually goes along, and you'll see it expands with the oxygen bubbles in it. But I guess not many scientists have eaten many Sunny Boys. It's funny, when I was in my teens, I once asked a scientist if she'd ever ridden a push bike in the rain to know that water runs up your back and makes your shirt all dirty and you've got to go home and tell your mother that she has to do more washing. And she said, of course not, I'd catch a cold. I guess these scientists don't actually get out much and actually observe the real world. So we'll go on a bit more. How the oceans cannot rise. Here's a few more examples of why the oceans can't rise due to ice melting. There's a new one actually. They're saying that there's thermal expansion, which is completely opposite to fact. I'll go into that later. Okay, so I used to snowboard in my 30s, and at one point I actually walked to the top of Kosciuszko in the middle of summer. In wintertime, there's heaps of snow on the top of Kosciuszko. In summertime, there's not. Interesting fact, I looked something up that we actually have more snow than the Swiss Alps. But on the Swiss Alps, there's snow in winter, but not in summer. On Everest, there's snow in winter, less in summer. These mountains that have snow during winter, but not in summer, it still doesn't affect the tides, doesn't affect the ocean, doesn't affect the height or the level. Here's a tide chart. Now, most people believe that the moon has so much gravity that it actually pulls the tides around, and that's how we have high and low tide. The reality is there's actually 4 tides in a day. So here is a tide chart for 2024. They've mapped out the tides for a full year, maybe longer. And in it, it will show you the 4 tides. And it will tell you how low it is, how high it is. It's mapped out. It's mapped out for God knows how long. Yet a scientist will make you panic and tell you that the oceans are rising. Yet, if you want to go fishing and get the best time to go fishing, just read a tide chart. It's not hard. It's very simple. Now, we've all been told, okay, that the oceans are going to rise. Here's another thing. Have you ever watched a couple of television shows like Bering Sea Gold or Ice Road Truckers? In the winter, Bering Sea freezes over, but in summer, it's liquid. In winter, the Ice Road Truckers build a road over the ice, but in summer, the road's not there. Neither's the ice. Still doesn't affect the level of the ocean. We've all been told that the ocean is 70% of the mass of the Earth, and that the land is only 30% of the mass of the Earth. So if we were to work out the actual amount of ice permanently on the 30% landmass, I reckon we'd be lucky if it was 0.5%. So how can 0.5% of the ice on the land flood 70% of the mass of the planet, which is water? It's physically not possible. It's like dropping an ice cube into a bowl of water. It's not going to do anything noticeable. They talk about the thermal expansion as the oceans warm up. But remember what we were taught when we were kids. Water freezes at below 0 and it boils at 100 degrees. In between that, nothing happens. So how could, say, the oceans rose 5 degrees? Even though scientists tell us get 1.5 degrees will increase detrimental damage to the world. Yet that 1.5 degrees, in Sydney, that's the difference between the beginning of morning tea and the end of morning tea in the middle of summer. 1.5 degrees, how is that going to affect anything on this planet when the coldest place in the world is Siberia, and yet the hottest place is the Sahara Desert. How is 1.5 degrees going to affect the planet? Think about that. How can that possibly happen? We have summer, we have winter, we have spring, we have autumn. Temperatures vary all over the place. Yet the scientists tell us if the planet increases 1.5 degrees, detrimental damage. How? They don't even understand how water works. Wow. Okay. Now, here's another thing that I'll try to explain. One of my many hobbies is military hardware. I love military hardware simply because it has a job to do. It does that job constantly. The whole killing thing I'm not really into, but the military hardware has a function and it does it. Here I'm going to show you an American submarine. Now, this American submarine, you'll note that it has the ailerons, right? The steering gear on the conning tower, okay? The flaps that make it swim through the water so that they can dive or rise. Now, you'll note that they're on the conning tower because they don't have to come up through the ice. But here's a Russian submarine. Russian submarine doesn't have it on the conning tower, they have it on the body, the tube. Why? Because they need to come up through the Arctic ice and break through the ice, which means that the Arctic ice is floating. Go back to the same principle. Alright, remember the iceberg? 10% above the water, 90% below the water. When it returns, same level. So all of this panic about how the oceans are rising, the world's doomed, it's not actually true. And here's something to think about. If these scientists don't understand all of this and they're scared, why would you listen to them? On the other hand, if they know all of this and they're trying to make you scared, why would you listen to them? Put it all together. Join the dots. It's not hard. It's actually quite easy to understand that the ocean cannot rise. It's physically impossible because remember, all of the ice that they're worried about is on the 30% mass of the planet, and any ice that's on the 70% water mass will return to the same level. It really is that simple. But you know what's really funny? All these guys have got university degrees, diplomas, PhDs, and I worked this out because I really like Sunny Boys. I really loved having Sunny Boys as a kid. That's how I learned how ice expands. And when it defrosts, it goes back to its liquid mass.